first Silmarillion film episode of 2021, starting the year off on the right foot, half an hour late as usual. Because that's how we roll on.
Absolutely, yes. We start when least expected. That's usually it.
Although, actually, if we were aiming for that, we would start on time or early.
That's true. That would be the true surprise. Yeah, yeah.
But we've got everything set up, and we needed to put in the extra time to make sure all the audio was working smoothly, because our first episode of the new year is an exciting one. We've got our good friend Phil Menzies on, and we're doing season 5 music. Hey, Phil.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for the welcome.
Yeah, and and Phil and I are joined as always by Corey Olsen, the Tolkien Professor.
Excellent. That's right. I'm here too. So Phil, you're joining us from Australia today, right?
Yes, not just today, every day.
Not just every day.
Which
yes,
part?
Blue Mountains, just to the west of Sydney. So yes, lovely. It's not quite misty out there. We're having quite a cool summer this year. Much better than last year.
Right.
But yes, about 2:30 on a Friday afternoon. So I've skived off from work a little bit early.
Excellent.
Thank
Well,
you.
I'm joining us here from Tirana Pontuna here tonight. So I'm also a little bit further away than usual. But there we are. Good. So you actually live, as Maria's pointing out, in the arid Lewin, basically. That's
yes, in the arid Lewin, I do, but nobody else calls it that.
And what a shame that is. And that's their loss, I would have to say.
They should.
Absolutely. Cool.
Oh, wait, can I just put my vote in for one of the first regional myth moots of the post-COVID era? Should definitely be Sydney.
Oh, we've been working on a down under, whether it's Australia or New Zealand. We've been working on an Aussie or Kiwi moot for some time now, and we had to shelve it for a while, and then of course we had to shelve everything for a while. But yeah, that's I would absolutely love for that to happen. That's definitely a plan of mine. So we'll see.
You could test the water. You could test the waters with some virtual moots.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, we're doing a few virtual moots this year, but it's hard because for us at Signum, our moots. Virtual moots are fun, but of course, virtual moots are kind of a lot like what we do every day. Like it's not. I'm not going to say it's not special, but it's kind of not special. I mean, like the whole point of our moot program is to vary. I mean, we're all online all the time, and so to be able to vary that with like the novelty of actually getting together in person is really, really exciting. And that's really kind of the whole drive of our moot program. So, we've done, and we're doing it. We have, and that I'll just use this as a segue to our announcements, because we do have virtual text moot coming up. The Texas folks are putting together a virtual text moot on February 13th. So it's kind of fun. Lots of people can join in instead of just the Texas folks. Text moot has been a wonderful event for the last several years now. So we do things like that eventually, but occasionally, I should say. But really looking forward to getting back into the in-person moot schedule. And the other two announcements while I'm here. One, a brief plug for Signum Clubs. Signum Clubs are starting up soon. They're going to be starting up in February, most likely. We're really excited about getting this program off the ground and hoping to have some exciting news soon about the Signum Clubs. Signum Clubs are our new extracurricular program for kids. This is for kids. We're going to start off with programs for kids from 3rd grade up through 12th grade. Book club discussions, creative writing workshops, language discussions, so both immersive conversational languages of living languages, and really fun translation classes for dead languages, starting off talking about Anglo-Saxon. So really cool opportunities for kids. I know many kids are don't have as many extracurricular opportunities because their schools are still just struggling to make classes happen in a lot of places and in many situations. So really excited to be able to offer this for folks. And of course, our next script discussion, the script discussions roll on. They're up to episode 6 in their discussions of the scripts, and that's going to be happening this very Sunday, as is January 10th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. There's a link here. You can go to our discussion boards to talk more about this. And a couple things that I would like to point out about this. We've changed the way that we're doing things a little bit this year. We're kind of mixing it up here in season 5. And we've been integrating discussions of the outlines as we've been going through the season, sort of the first time here. And our script discussions have been proceeding along kind of in parallel with our discussions and keeping ahead of the podcast there. I just want to make sure that folks know, just because we're doing, and the script discussions are being broadcast here on GoToWebinar and also on our Twitch channel. And that's really great. But I want to make sure that people realize that just because the sessions are happening live, if you can't attend live, it's still totally okay. It's really good to contribute any thoughts or ideas that you have on the discussion board. Our script team is still really interested to see, any of those kinds of asynchronous contributions to the script discussions that come in there. So just definitely wanted to invite folks to really take advantage of the opportunity to get involved in the discussion there. So those are the things that are happening and that are coming up. But today, what we are talking about is music. We're going through at several points. We're going to be looking at different kind of creative commissions that we have. We've discussed conceptually through the ideas for the season and through all of our major storylines. We're now going through episode by episode, but interspersed in here, we're going to be doing some commissions, instructions. Right now that we have in our heads a good idea of what's supposed to be happening here in season 5, we want to get together with our creative folks who have been contributing so wonderfully to this program all the way through and talk with them about the kinds of things we would really like to see now while we're still early in the discussion, so that they have some time to work on stuff, and then we can come back and look at some of the work that folks have done when we come to the end of the season. And so today we're going to be doing this with music. And Philip Menzies, of course, is joining us. He has been our composer for the SilmFilm project since season 1. He's been doing wonderful work through our first 4 seasons. And we're going to be talking about what kinds of things we want to see. So we're going to be sort of thinking through the kinds of themes, songs, concepts that we really want to be kind of working on as we're thinking about season 5 and the stories that we've been developing. So Phil, I think you can see on the screen here. Murray has posted some of these sort of rules that you have been kind of developing and working with. You want to kind of walk us through the rules here and the rationale for them, or kind of not rules exactly, but sort of framework, right? For the SilmFilm music.
Exactly. And look, I didn't come up with all of these. Right. Very early on, there was discussion around the score and what style of score was wanted. So I think you guys came to the conclusion very early that it would be a more traditional classical score. If you consider, say, a score for a movie like Tenet, which I saw recently, it's very, very electronic, and we didn't want to go down that path. We wanted to sort of emulate what had already been done for what had already been set up for Lord of the Rings and Hobbit movies previously. It doesn't mean that there's not some room there for some very interesting musical work. And there's always synthesizers can get in there and do something really do something that really brings home a point or goes very well with a particular character or scene.
Right.
Very early on, you Corey, said that you wanted there to be no human voices in the score until the Children of Ilúvatar came on the scene. And so we've kept to that. All of our music was instrumental, except it was instrumental, and we've sort of kept to that, which has been really good, and that fits in really nicely with the anal interlay, because the description in there is that all the sounds were of instruments.
Right.
There's not a single mention in the anal interlay to voices.
Right.
So we have kept with that. I've sort of made a decision, because I based my work very heavily on, say, what Howard Shore has done in Lord of the Rings. He worked very closely using leitmotifs, which are little pieces of music which can represent a character or a concept, or a scene, a place, a people. So that's what we've been working on in the first 4 seasons of SilmFilm. And when you start to have a wide collection of small pieces of music that represent different things, you can then string them all together into, say, an 8-minute long piece of music, which I did at the end of last year, which was for the Rising of the Sun sequence. So that full 8 minutes was almost entirely composed of leitmotifs all strung together to tell that particular story.
And I just love that. I mean, I love being able that, that concept of kind of going through and being able to say, okay, give me the purpose leitmotif followed by the fall leitmotif, and let's throw in some Sauron in there, and and then, I mean, it's really cool to have these elements, and of course it's not quite as modular as that, right? It's not just like sort of streaming together these separate things. The way that they can be blended together, either through instrumentation or, but that they can just be kind of alluded to. It's not just winding up the same segment. But I love the way that works. To be able to build that kind of narrative structure into it, and I think it's very clear, even to an amateur like me. It's very clear how effectively Howard Shore did that in the Lord of the Rings films. I just rewatched the original Star Wars trilogy a couple weeks ago with my kids, and I was thinking about that because I was thinking about this episode as I knew we had this on the horizon. And of course, John Williams did such a brilliant job with that. It was something that was really kind of on, getting my attention. I was just particularly noticing some of the themes, like especially the Princess Leia theme, and the Force theme and the Han Solo theme. They're just a bunch of times, and especially I was watching some of this while I was doing other things. Like we had it up on my iPad, and I was like doing stuff in the kitchen while it was on, and like I'd have my back to the screen, and I could tell what was happening. Like I knew exactly what was happening because I could hear like, oh, there,
that's
Princess Leia just entered. I can tell. Like she hasn't said anything yet, but I know she's on screen because there it is. So anyway, it's the way that those kinds of elements, those kinds of leitmotifs can be adapted, integrated, brought together. It's such an important part of the storytelling, and I really, really love that element. So anyway, I'm really excited that we're doing that. I think that's it makes Perhaps this is like me speaking as a real musical amateur. That is like when we do it that way, it is like narrative construction in a way that I can understand, so it makes it easier for me for sure. But I've seen how effective that can be in scores. So.
I've got a couple of examples. I've given Corey a couple of examples. One was of the mithril coat in the Hobbit movies, and one was of the Arkenstone. If you want to
sure,
roll
yeah.
them.
So let's play the mithril coat leitmotif here.
Mm-hmm. So this is when it was given by Bilbo to Frodo. And this is when it was given by Thorin to Bilbo. So yeah, you can hear that they're the same theme, but they've been played slightly differently. One's faster than the other, and you can see how this theme was not attached to the coat itself. It was attached to the giving of the coat.
Yeah.
The giving of the coat. So that's a sort of realm that we're in with light motifs. They can represent anything. It's a little bit like the ring theme in the Lord of the Rings movies. Usually not every time, but usually the ring theme appears when the ring changes hands.
Right.
So it's to really emphasize that changing of hands in that. It's not just when the ring's on the scene. So you can do all those sorts of things with light motifs.
Yeah.
And that one for the Mithril Code, that was the only time that music appeared in any of those movies. Once in Fellowship of the Ring, and once in the Battle of the Five Armies.
Right. And I'm really interested also in the differences, right? I mean, obviously you can hear the same theme, especially it was the brass, it was the trumpet
oboe,
line.
The oboe.
It was an oboe?
Oboe, yes.
It was an oboe. Okay, cool. Anyway, so you could hear that line on the top, but the pacing is different, right? I mean, it was much slower and sort of statelier when it was Thorin giving it to Bilbo, and it sounded quick. Like it sounded like they slowed it down just a little bit. You know, the tempo, and that had a really interesting effect, I think, on the. You know, it's the same, but it's like now the context is different, right?
And the other one is the Arkenstone, which once again, first time is when it's first revealed in the opening of An Unexpected Journey.
Right.
And the second occurrence is when they look at the in the Desolation of Smaug, when they turn inside the hidden door and look at the carving of it above the door.
Okay. The second time sounds sort of fuller, right? Am I right about that? Sort of the instrumentation a little bit fuller?
Yes, I think the first time it was higher, and because you're actually the visual was actually looking directly at the stone embedded in Thror's throne. They tried to give it a much higher area, tinkly sort of sound.
Right.
But the second time, when you're not actually seeing the stone, you're seeing a representation of the stone, they've toned that down significantly. So it is much deeper and is in a way fuller. Yeah. But I think it is trying to represent that we're not seeing the actual thing at this point in time. We're just seeing a representation of it.
Right. Cool. Cool.
Anyway, so that's just a little lesson in light motifs.
That Arkenstone theme is pretty iconic. That one, like whenever the minute you mentioned that was one of the examples we discussed, I heard it in my mind's ear, as it were.
Yeah.
That one kind of really. I haven't watched those films nearly as much as I've watched Lord of the Rings, but that one stuck with me for sure.
And yeah, but once again, it didn't appear a lot in those movies.
Right. Yeah, which is that's kind of remarkable. So hey, Nick Palazzo asked, do we hear the Mithril Coat theme when it's when Frodo reveals it in Moria, when it's revealed that that's what saved his life?
No, we don't. As I said, so I think it's more attached to the giving. Sorry, that was all my music books falling down to the giving of the coat rather than the coat itself.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay, that is interesting. Yeah, and you know, Nick says it goes to show how well associated it is, because like he says, I thought I literally remembered hearing it. there. And I was thinking of that too, Nick. My first impulse was that we heard it there also. But yeah, I mean, you're right. The kind of association that builds. So the other thing that I really like about these two examples, Phil, is that we're not talking about like a major thing, like the Princess Leia theme that I mentioned, right, from Star Wars. Like that is played all the time because Princess Leia is on screen a lot, and it's not just like it's automatic every time she comes in, but almost, I mean, it comes up a lot because it's associated with a major character. And we have some themes like that are associated with major characters. Especially, we did a lot of work in season 1 associating particular themes with particular Valar, knowing that we were going to want to pay that off down the road, right? So that as particular the sort of the activity of as the Valar kind of recede into the background, they're still active, right? They're still a presence, even when it's a sort of indirect presence in Middle Earth. And so, we're going to want to have, when we see the eagles flying in the sky, we're going to want to play the Manwë theme, right? We're going to want to remember the Manwë theme. When we see the stars at night, we're going to want to remember the Varda theme. I mean, that's going to come up. There's all kinds of moments where I can imagine the Varda theme being relevant. Thinking about the, I don't mean like when people are singing the Elbereth Gilthoniel song, but like at times that are kind of like the Elbereth Gilthoniel. I mean, like times when someone is crying out for help and really hoping that somebody is listening, right? To be able to have, the Varda theme that we can kind of go to and point to. So, we have those kind of sort of major things. But again, what I really am interested in about your examples from Howard Shore, the Arkenstone theme and the Giving of the Mithril Coat theme, those are very restricted. They're very distinctive, right? And it's clear how he's playing on that. But it's, happens once in, 2 times in the whole trilogy, basically, that, that entire thing. So that is, it's that we can be thinking about things in those ways. And we've done, some of that stuff. Like I'm thinking of the Dragon Helm of Dorloman theme that we, you did for season 4, right? There are definitely going to be some things. I'm going to go ahead and call the fact that we're going to need an Anglachel theme, right? A black sword theme. That clearly is going to have to happen. It's still a little bit down the road, but talk about your inanimate objects that need theme music, right? I mean, that is a big one.
Yes, that's right. And maybe even Narsil.
Yeah. A Narsil theme I think would be really interesting. Yeah. Yeah, cool.
My sort of final rule, which was on the last page, was I've just got this personal rule that I'm not going to use any piano instrumentation at this time. I transgressed that right at the beginning. If you had to listen to my Nienor track, I've got piano in there, but I think I did that before I'd sort of thought it through. And of course, Bob White has piano in it, but that's only a joke anyway.
Right. Right. That's the theme that doesn't exist, in fact. So that's perfectly legitimate.
That's right. That's right. So I've got this sort of personal rule that I'm not going to do any piano instrumentation until we get to Numenor, because I just don't have the feeling that this society is technologically advanced enough to have an instrument, a complicated instrument such as a pianoforte.
Yeah.
Obviously, Sauron was able to create his hurdy-gurdy, his evil hurdy-gurdy, in the last season.
Right.
So yeah, I've just got this rule that I'm trying to go by, and I'm always thinking of projecting into the future. Like in last season, I did a little tiny motif at the Hiding of Valinor, which I've called Wingalot, which is going to be part of the big theme for Arendelle in many seasons time. Right. So I'm always thinking about that sort of thing, what can sort of lead to other themes in the future. And I'm already thinking about a theme called The Land of the Gift. And it will just have 5 notes.
Nice.
Just have 5 piano notes. and that will be the theme that the music will be based around these 5 piano notes.
Cool.
But
Yeah.
I figured that Numenor is when we really get that grandeur, and they're the people who are capable of producing an instrument like this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Not that we will show pianos in the courts, but I feel that there will be a stronger association for pianos with Numenor than with anyone else.
Yeah, you're right. Your whole society has to be in a particular place for you to make pianos, right? I mean, like that's it's not that the Noldor are incapable of inventing a piano, but the Noldor and Beleriand, like, who's gonna make a piano, right? Like you have to be in a certain place for that. And the Numenorians, I agree. There you've got the time, the place, the opportunity. If anyone's gonna have chamber music with harpsichord or piano, it's going to be the Numenorians, right? That makes perfect sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So look, one things I'd be really pleased of during the session for all the people who are listening is to write comments and make suggestions for as something comes to you, what would be a good piece of music for season 5, or even as we talk about where themes for season 5 are going to lead us in future seasons. Just put that in the comments. Because this session is these sorts of sessions are really good for creative people for inspiration. So I rely a lot on you, Corey, and Dave and Trish when she was here for putting forward ideas. Oh, it'd be really good if we had a musical theme for this.
Yeah.
And that would be what would get my creative juices starting to work.
Excellent. Well, let's start talking about some of the major ideas that we know we're going to need. And of course, the first primary one is men. The introduction of men is the biggest new thing, right, in season 5. So going back to the elves, we had, if I remember correctly, there was like a general elf theme, but then each of the 3 major houses of the elves had their sort of separate themes, which were all connected back to the overall theme, or was it just the 3 which were related together?
It was just the 3. I've never actually produced this, but I had and I always have the intention of going back and filling in the gaps. One of the gaps that I would fill in would be the Awakening of the Elves at Cuivianen.
Right.
And I just have this sound in my head of just a single, just 3-note call. And that's really a call for the elves to awaken.
Right.
So I really latched onto those three successive notes, and each of the 3 themes for the elves, for the Vanya, the Noldor, the Teleri, all start with 3 notes repeated. So that was how I linked them back. But yes, I'd love to go back and do a waking up at Cuivianen.
Right. Right. And putting together a sort of an overall, People of the Stars theme. Yeah.
Yes, it would probably be in that, and be heavily related to Cuivianen, or possibly even to if we ever do any scenes with the Avari, because they're sort of still locked in that time and place,
right,
and they haven't seen the light.
Right.
So yeah, that's the sort of thing that I may do.
Right.
But yeah, so the 3 notes, and you'll find throughout my music that you'll continually hear those 3 notes being played. I did that a lot in the Oath of Fëanor. I really wanted to get across that this was that was an Elvish oath, and it was the elves who were making, and it was really associated with them.
Right. I remember the sort of the overtones of the Noldor theme in the Curse of Fëanor song. But I'm forgetting now. I remember you explained before ways in which you were kind of twisting it, right? In which you were kind of taking that Noldor theme and kind of altering it through the oath.
Yes. That's right. This is the Noldor theme. 1, 2, 3. And yes, and we moved that into a minor key when they started to become a bit more militaristic and start to focus on building weapons and armor. So that became.
Right.
And then I had actually planned this right from the beginning. Right in the middle of it, we got this, which is Morgoth's triad.
Yes.
So the became. So the
Morgoth's triad in the middle. That's right.
Morgoth's triad and the Noldor were, and I planned that.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That was the part especially. I thought there was a key change, but it was the insertion of the Morgoth's triad that I didn't remember exactly, but that's what I was recalling. Yeah, cool. Very cool stuff. Okay, so
yeah, they're the sorts of cool things you can do. Oh, one thing I didn't say about the Oath of Fëanor is that when I wrote it last year, I wanted to be really full, have a really full choral sound, and I did 6 parts. And then I'd nearly completed and I said, what the hell am I thinking of? It needs 7 parts.
Absolutely.
It needs 7 parts.
Yes.
So I quickly added a 7th part.
Yeah.
So the dynamic that we now have with the Oath of Fëanor is that every time a son of Fëanor dies, 1 part drops off.
Right. Awesome. Yeah, that's great. I was going to say, I was going to make a joke how you were just originally anticipating the death of Amrod, basically, with your 6-part version, or, Amrod not being 100%, invested in it. But, yeah.
And in the end, we just have Maglor wandering the shores of Middle-earth, single voice with a harp.
Right. Awesome. Yeah, it's very cool.
So they're the sorts of cool things you can do with music.
Yeah. No, I love this. I love the narrative involvement here and thinking about these different ways we can do. Let me actually say, before we get any further, because I want to make sure I remember to say this later on. Since we're doing the script outlines and everything and discussing our way through those in advance this time, so like we already have 1.5, maybe 1 2/3 episodes already discussed and kind of agreed upon. You know what I think would be really cool, Phil? I think it'd be really cool for you to go through and do like a very, like, not like super detailed, but just like a little kind of annotation, right? To kind of mention like particular themes that would come in at particular points in this, because it's a list of scenes, and what happens in those scenes. So it's not like it's going to be a full, a full scoring of the thing, but just to kind of mention, like, okay, we definitely want to make sure that this theme appears here, and an idea. I think it'd be really, really fun to have a kind of annotation of that. That'd be really neat.
Okay, I'll spend some time doing that, and I'll send that your way, Nick.
Yeah.
Or Rhiannon.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Anyway, okay, so let's talk about the houses of men. So like have the 3 the 3 peoples of the Eldar. We have the 3 houses of the Edain, the house of Beor, the house of Holleth, and the house of Hador. Now, again, as I recall, there was a basic pattern that the Vanyar, Noldor, and Teleri themes all had in common, right? They had different variations.
They had those 3 notes.
Right.
They all started with those 3 notes.
Right.
And they were different. The starting note, even though the starting note was the same, I shifted the keys around them so that they never started on the same note in a given, say, major scale. So for the Vanyar, it started on the 3rd note. For the scale, for the Noldor, it started on the 5th note of the scale. Mm-hmm. For the Teleri, I think it started on the dominant on the 1st note of the scale. So I changed it around that way, but they all had that in different tempos. But yes, the Vanya, I really picked up on the Vanya's adoration of Manway and Vada. So it was a very hymn-like piece of music, with very traditional choral hymn, 4-part harmony. The Noldor was much faster. It was an instaccato, so it was really reflecting their crafting ability and their intricacy. And then the Teleri, what I focused on was the wave after wave of Teleri across the continent as they got slowed, and that was it had a lot of repetition in it. So the whatever. And then that would repeat da 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 da, and it would repeat, another instrument would repeat that da 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 da. So lots of repetition. Get that idea of wave on wave on wave coming over the continent. So that were the three things that I chose that would represent the three kindreds of the elves well. But when it came to the Houses of Men and listening to the discussions on the Houses of Men, they're not so clear cut.
No,
they're not so clear cut, and to me it's sort of there's less of a distinction between men than there is between elves, at least in this part of the story.
Yeah.
So just wanted to know what to focus on. I'm not totally lost. I've got some ideas. But
yeah. Well, one of the things that was. So I guess there are two different questions that I find myself thinking about. One is thinking about the kind of characteristics of each individual theme, right? You know, to kind of what are some of the things that we would want to try to capture in those three themes. And the second thing that I would is like how they would come together, like what, you know, because we do need to show that these are the three kindred of the Edain, right? That there are connections among these three, and I'm not sure exactly. You know, we could do it with a similar kind of, you know, a repetition of a particular pattern of notes or of a particular, you know, sort of harmony or chords or something like that. You know, that we could use to kind of bind them together. I don't know that we would want to do it exactly the same way that we did for the elves, but maybe something similar. I mean, the connection between the elvish themes is sufficiently subtle, I think, that we could do a similar thing without it seeming merely repetitious. But maybe we just sort of start off with the individual themes first and then think about putting them together. So of the three, the House of Holleth seems simplest to me. Determination, yes. Indomitability is what I would say we want for the House of Holleth, right? The House of Holleth is, you know, with this sort of iron will, you know, going to go their own way no matter who tells them what, right? That's kind of, to me, the central theme and concept for the House of Holleth. So I don't know how to translate that into music, but that's the thing that I would and so something that shows like the steadiness, right? Continuing on no matter what happens. So I'm kind of imagining it with it's got to have a sort of a regular beat to it, right? You know, that it just keeps driving on.
It does.
I think
little ornamentation as possible.
Not fancy. Yeah, not at all. This is the least fancy of all of the three, because the House of Baer and the House of Hodor are both going to become quite fancy in their own ways, right? The House of Hodor is going to be peers of Elven Kings, and the House of Baer are going to be, you know, fancy, you know, Nargothrond dwellers, at least for a while. So yeah, no, the House of Holleth is the simplest theme. Do you have any immediate...
And it is going to settle down in the end to when they finally make it to the Forest of Brethil.
Yeah,
like they're content.
Yes.
and they're not going anywhere else, and they've got a very pastoral type lifestyle going there.
Yeah, yeah. Nick is thinking of maybe the constant repetition of a bass note throughout the House of Holleth song might sort of convey the sort of the steadiness of their journey. But I agree, contentment at the end, because they are going to settle down and be content. Though they're never going to be fancy, right? They are the simplest of all of the peoples as far as ornamentation and stuff is concerned. So definitely, as I say, that to me seems the easiest. The House of Holleth, conceptually, I think is pretty straightforward. The House of Hodor, I would go so heroic. Yeah, I mean, it's true that like most of the greatest heroes, I mean, of course, Baron is a big exception, but there are a lot of big heroes, right? In the House of Hodor. So a more heroic theme. I like the militant idea. I think that of the three of them, they are by far the most military of all of them. So something that sounds actually military in the sense of army music, literally, like, marching music, is something that I could see. Not only because that's sort of more their style. They are the ones who are going to form an army, and they're going to be serving, alongside the armies of Fingon up there in the north. The House of Beor is going to end up fighting in Dorthonion, but they don't fight in an army in the same way. They're more rangers than soldiers. So they're definitely the most military ones, and also the size of them, right? The way that this kind of like marching music conveys the idea of a large group. Now, of course, the irony of having something, military associated with the House of Hodor is that it's also the most deeply divided internally of all of the houses. So, we don't necessarily want to convey the idea of the House of Hodor all marching in step, because that certainly isn't the case all along. But of course, here is where we can bring in some of our, we have themes for conflict and division, right? From earlier seasons. So, to be able to kind of take, that leitmotif combined with the theme of the House of Hodor, could work really well around the council, for instance, and the big debate, about what they do.
Actually, talking of debate, yes, we've actually got a new composer on board.
Oh, right.
Yeah, Megan. She's only reasonably new, and she's been doing a lot of catching up. But she's posted a couple of tracks, and one of them is to represent the great debates of the Noldor. Sorry, not of the Noldor, of the Valar.
Oh, great.
So So I'm talking with her about how to present it, and to sort of bring it into the fold of the rest of the music, so that people don't have to go to different places to find them. So I'll be discussing with her the development as well, and we'll sort of divvy up tasks. We don't want to duplicate what we're doing, but we also want the music that both of us do to work together.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, welcome, Megan. Great.
So we've got a debate. We've got a debate theme that
cool.
that the Valar use, and we can insert that into the
neat
into that council.
Neat. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Hey, actually, that reminds me in a very indirect way. Do you see any kind of sort of consistent change in instrumentation, perhaps, to convey the difference between elves and men? Is there something in the quality of the music that would kind of convey, like, this is mortal music compared to the music of the elves? I don't know if that would be done by instrumentation or some other element. I'm just kind of wondering if there's if there's a way that we could capture, because this is humans come in, this is something completely different, right? It's such a major thing. It's not just like we have the 3 original houses of the elves and now we have 3 other houses and they happen to be human, right? I feel like to some extent it almost feels like there should be some kind of really, like, this is different now, quite different. I throw that out.
Gone down that.
Yeah.
I haven't gone down that path. Ethereal sounding, sort of very high choral, above everything gets that across really, really well. I think Howard Shore used that with Lothlorien when they're actually in Lothlorien, and had that very high choral sound above the theme. Incidentally, he did very successfully turn that theme into a militaristic theme when the elves arrived at Helm's Deep.
At Helm's Deep, right.
Exactly the same theme, but just had that bum 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 ba da dum bum 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 bum.
Right.
Very, very strong militaristic, but exactly the same thing. So it's possible that's really possible to change the sound of a melody or a piece of music to get across a totally different idea.
Yeah. I would just be interested to see if there's a way that could be done. I mean, because of course it would have to be something that would be consistent. But I've got to think if we could do that, it would really pay off, right? If like down the road we can have like, if people can hear, no matter what the theme is, like that's a human theme, that's an elvish theme, right? There are lots of ways I can imagine that paying off in really interesting ways down the road. I mean, like, not least at the Last Alliance, right? With with Numenor, this, all along the way, there's going to be opportunities for, to sort of create an elvish feel, right, versus a human feel for, for events and what's happening. That example, actually, of the Haldir and the elves showing up at the Battle of Helm's Deep, in the movies is a really great one, because that is super effective, right? When that theme plays, I mean, I could hear it in my head as soon as you mentioned it, right? It is enormously powerful. That and now wow, all of a sudden elves are here, right? And you get that feeling of, oh my goodness, not just it's allies, not just it's help, but it's elves, right? It's elvish help. Is a really powerful effect, and I really put that down to Howard Shore and what he did there. So it would be really cool to have something. Now there are a couple of people who are suggesting perhaps some maybe some different tonal systems or modes for the different races. Would be one way to think about it. Maybe something as Michael was suggesting, maybe something like a more medieval mode rather than a modern tonality. I would be interested to see how something like that, would.
Yes, and there are different modes. I've really got to get my head around them more. There are different modes like the Lydian mode, right, in music, and there and it sort of pushes the scale up. So you get these really interesting overtones at particular parts of the scale. Right. Yeah. So I'll have to research more and really get my head wrapped around Lydian mode and some of those other ones, and see if they're going to be appropriate. See if they're going to work for any of these 3 themes.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up modal questions later on a different topic, but yeah, and a couple of people are suggesting some sort of trends in instrumentation also to sort of convey, that associate certain instruments, dominantly with elves versus men. Okay, so yeah, I think so. Yeah, Stephen H. had mentioned the military theme associated with the House of Hodor, and I really agree with that. And that certainly is something that can be adapted if we have like a sort of a general kind of heroic military theme for them, that's easy to be adapted into the particular themes of important characters like Hador and Huor and Turin, of course, eventually. And, so that will be a flexible baseline, I would think, to go from the broadly military to the specifically heroic, right? The sort of, with particular characters. The House of Baer.
Yes, I would expect. I would expect that those themes to be able to be heard again with Huron, and with Turin and with Tuor, rather than inventing new themes for them. It will be a way of really helping the audience root them back into this particular house,
right?
Rather than sort of think, oh, who's this guy? And we're like, I missed last season. Where did he come from?
Right.
The music will help them relate those people back into that particular house.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's going to be important, and of course, we do have to be thinking ahead towards the particular characters, the particular very important characters whose themes are going to emerge from this, right? Down to Tuor and Eärendil, of course, from the House of Hador, but also Beor, mingling that in there. Of course, with the House of Beor, I think we have to think first and foremost about the Baron theme, right? I mean, he's the most important member of the House of Beor. But I think we're going to want an Andreth theme too, aren't we? Andreth kind of feels like she needs a theme. She's going to be an important character in this. And of course, that would be a fun way to introduce her. Holy cow. We talked, because we're going to have like pediatric Andreth in episode 1, right? She's going to be like 4 in episode 1. So we can introduce her theme there, like, when she's asking questions of Beor there in episode 1, when he's, leading the kindergarten field trip there en route. And then we can tie that to, when we come back and we see teenage Andreth again in episode 2, we can help to kind of tie that without having to. Oh, sorry, that's Adonel. Andreth is later. Anyway, sorry. I'm forgetting.
Yeah. Point taken. I think the first time we see Andreth is related to Adonel.
Right. Yeah. And actually, it would be interesting. They could even share a theme, like to have like the wise woman theme, right? That Adonel and Andreth could even, or maybe different, slightly different versions of them. I would think that they would be associated together with that.
Yeah.
Actually, there are a lot of things that could be done with that. In fact,
that's right, and it sort of leads us on to I think what we're going to discuss, which is sort of the mingling of elves and men.
Yes,
which definitely. Will be very, very important.
Very important.
But my question there around the House of Hador was, when I read the Silmarillion, particularly in those scenes set in Hithlum after the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, excuse my Quenya, after the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, that sort of feel is very Anglo-Saxon, with the landscape, with the equivalent to the mead halls, reminded me so much of the Rohirrim, but just without the horses.
Right.
And I think that they came with Tolkien. They came from the same root, but the Rohirrim just have that horsiness and that horsey feel. And I mentioned that horsey feel to the music,
right.
Which in the Two Towers, their theme has a very definite horsey feel to it, and Lotro have done the same thing with their Rohan music. They've got which is timing all the way through their music, which is very, very similar to Empty Halves of Coconuts being banged together.
Right, exactly. At least if you do it properly. Yeah. No, I agree. As Tony Mead said, Rohan without horses is basically Mercia. It's Anglo-Saxon, right? I mean, it's that's exactly right. And I agree with you. That's something that I found really striking. It never really jumped out at me so much before until I read The Children of Húrin, like the first time it was all put together as one big fat novel and not just something I was reading or jumping around multiple books in. The Anglo-Saxon feel of the culture of the House of Hador is so much clearer in that work. The ancestral hall that Broda has now taken over, and the scenes with young Turin coming before Húrin and the giving of the knife and all of those kinds of scenes that we get in the Children of Húrin, that are not a part of the published Silmarillion story, of course, though they're in Unfinished Tales. But again, the feel of that is so much more, I agree with you, so much more Anglo-Saxon that I think that that's certainly worth exploring for the House of Hador. I've been avoiding talking about the House of Beor because I don't have a clear idea for the House of, or rather, I guess my problem is, if I had to define the House of Beor, I worry about creating too much work for you, because it's going to start off one way, right? It's going to change it's got to change when they go. So there's got to be, the House of Beor theme has to have 3 different styles, right? The episode 1, we're on the road seeking the light in the west style, right? We now live in Nargothrond and we are civilized house pets of the elves of Nargothrond style, which is, I think should be the most ornate of all 3, but also with an air of like melancholy to it, right? Because it's unfulfilled. It's they're, although not intentionally, they're being held back. And then, of course, when they go up, to Ladros, they change again, right? And now they become active. They become militant, not military exactly, but they become active and they become hunters and training to become warriors. So it should be the same theme, but I feel like there are going to be 3 very different versions of that theme, which are going to need to be. So I hesitate to that feels like a lot to ask, especially since the first of the 3 only shows up in 1 episode, and the second one gets a couple episodes, and it just. No, Tony is suggesting that that could perhaps be, you could have one theme played in 3 different modes, which seems that seems like an interesting way to do it. James Oakley was suggesting, he says, maybe go from a theme with ornate harmony that gets whittled down to one solo instrument playing the theme. It could be done with instrumentation. I would definitely think the Nargothrond version would be, at the one hand, I get the most ornate, the fanciest, right? The most complex, and yet melancholy, right? Slow, sad, and then simplifying, or I don't know, James, I'm kind of thinking solo instrument for the first theme, right? Like the one clear solitary vision as they're going through, and then it gets complicated and sad, and then becomes more, I don't know, choral, maybe? Anyway, I'm not sure. But fortunately, this is not my job to figure that out. I'll just throw out ideas. But a modal shift could be really interesting. Michael kind of likes that idea. It was said it would, the theme stays roughly the same, but the harmony changes with the mode. It'd be like, could be interesting, right? we're in Nargothrond, so Mixolydian in Nargothrond, and then, you know, I don't know, Dorian for the afterwards. I don't know. My memory of the musical modes is sketchy. It's been a long time since freshman year music theory class in college. So
yeah. But we're really not going to hear the House of Baor theme beyond Beren.
Yeah.
It's, because as a house they are gone. I mean, possibly with isn't one of Tuord or sorry Hurin or Huor's wives, isn't one of them from the House of Baor?
Yeah, and I don't know how we want to handle that kind of thing. I mean, so the wives are from the House of the House of Baor. So Morrowind's theme is going to be a House of Baor theme, right? That's going to be another really important one. Not in this season, but later on. It will become important later on.
And maybe in a very sad way. Given her eventual fate, and really, they then become like Turin's then a part of the House of Hador rather than Baor from that point.
Yeah. We're going to need a way to bring.
Well, I think it's probably a good time to talk about Script 1, and one of the things that I did love about Script 1 was the song "The Light of the West."
Yes.
At least the words of "The Light of the West," which I think Rhiannon has written. Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. I was quite taken by it, and that's the sort of thing that gets your inspiration going. And I think the suggestion has been made that maybe the tune of that song should become the theme for the House of Baor.
Yeah. I could easily. I mean, I would think that their song would have to be involved in their theme would have to be involved in that song for sure.
And it would be a very traditional, piece of music. So you're not looking at complicated.
Right.
We can add on, as I said, we can add ornamentation for when they are in Nargothrond. And it can become sad when the time needs for it to make that change.
Cool.
But yeah, something simple, something more like a folk song, and we can beef that up into huge instrumentation when the need arises.
Cool.
I'm reminded of the
Tony says he's already done a demo of the music of that, so that's already in the works. I look forward to reviewing that. We're just talking about concepts today. If I get too distracted in listening to actual pieces today, we're never going to have any prayer of ending anything like on time. So, but yeah, I really look forward to that. I think that's going to be awesome, Tony. I'm glad you.
Yes.
I'm glad you did that.
I did message Tony. I thought that this was right. This was Tony's style.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Okay, so thinking forward, then the theme of the season. This is a tricky one, right? Change. We were able to do a sort of a series of themes based on last year's theme, right? Last season's theme. The theme of reconciliation. We had the, division and reconciliation and forgiveness, and so we're kind of working out the different sort of stages of that whole process with related but separate themes. The theme of change is not exactly amenable to that in the same way, I think, right? I mean, because it's not a separate thing. It's about how other things are affected, right? So it seems almost like the way to capture the theme of change from season 5 is not to have a new theme for that concept, but to do something to the themes, if you see what I mean, right? To indicate that change. And of course, one of the things that I'm thinking now, I'm not saying we don't have a change theme. We could have a change theme in particular, but I don't know. I think it was Marie's suggestion that one of the things we would want to try to capture musically would be something of the tension between the elf perspective and the human perspective, right? Some kind of like duet of, sort of like long, slow notes and a rapidly moving line, on the other hand, which is playing whole melodic arcs, right, during the time when the other one is has barely changed from one note to another. I don't know. Again, obviously, you can come up with better ways to do it, but something like that to kind of convey this tension, right? The tension between the sort of presumption on the one hand of things remaining the same, expectation really on the part of the elves, expectation and presumption shifting to like actual desire to hold on to things, right? Actual desire for things not to change. This is something that's going to be really important for Turgon, of course, down the road, right? So, maybe we have, maybe what I'm thinking of here is actually a theme for resistance to change, right? We're going to want that for sure, but just like encountering change and the newly accelerated pace of the world, that's the kind of core theme of the season, right? That's kind of the main thing that's happening behind the scenes when men and the arrival of men is just sort of exaggerating that phenomenon all the way through. So
I think that'd work. I think that'd work well. I'm just sort of thinking about it now, and thinking that yes, you could have something that is low, possibly in the bass, and is moving very slowly, and on top of that, you could have something that is more changeable, is a little bit more erratic in nature, and is played by higher instruments. But you would start with the one with the low one, the immovable one, and gradually the other one would, and it would just be a matter of a volume change between the two. And depending on the scene, if you've got a scene in Gondolin, then it's completely the unchanging slow theme. Right. But if you've got a scene which is just men, you can do just the ornamental quickly changing tune, and in those times when there is conversation, then you can have one melody changing coming up over the other, depending on how the conversation is going.
Yeah. I have to admit that this is the place where I was thinking about modes and things and wondering if one of the ways in which we could convey the idea of change is through modulations of themes, right? Modulating, not just modulating in key, but modulating in mode, actually kind of shifting so that, again, it's the same thing, because the change, I mean, for people who aren't familiar with musical modes, the shift can be really subtle, right? When you're changing from one mode to another, it just changes the harmonic patterns a little bit. It's like mostly the same, but it doesn't sound quite exactly the same. And that might be one way to convey, having places where that's changing, might be a really interesting, wait, I don't. So that was the other point. But of course, if we're gonna mess with modes for human versus elves and stuff, then we probably wouldn't want to do that. But because then it would just sound like we're shifting back and forth between different different peoples or something, which isn't exactly what we'd be doing. But when I was just kind of thinking about how would we. Just the difference between having a particular change theme and having change be a function, like a thing that happens to the themes, in a way to kind of convey that musically. I don't know.
I'll do a bit of experimentation with that and see what I come up with.
Yeah, most of my musical ideas are completely. I have no idea how they would sound. I'm just like kind of throwing stuff out there. So yeah.
I do know I did a little bit of that in Manway's theme last year, and the resistance is futile. Is that what I called it? No, resistance is fruitful. Sorry.
Yeah.
Fruitful. The resistance is fruitful piece of music, which had Manway's theme played in a different mode. It wasn't in a different key; it was in a different mode, which meant some of the intervals between notes were slightly changed. And that's but if you think a bit like what they did in what happened in Empire Strikes Back with Yoda's theme. Yoda's theme is very much like that. It plays one way and it plays in a different mode higher up.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so thinking about the next point, the elf-human romance issue, I'm now thinking the kind of counterpoint, not exactly counterpoint, that's totally the wrong word, but the two, like the one long, slow, sustained melody and then the rapid, quick moving melody, the elf-human thing. I think that what I'm thinking of there, or rather I'm thinking the general kind of thing that I'm thinking of there seems to me might actually work better, not as trying to convey change, but trying to convey to be like an elf-human interaction theme, right? Like elf meets human theme. Because that, of course, is going to be something we're going to want a lot of. And, of course, it would be really fun if, for instance, Finrod plays that theme on his harp, right? When, something like that, we can kind of hear that theme in his harp music when first he picks that up in episode 1. But to have this kind of interaction, and the reason I'm thinking of that is that that's something that could then be adapted for the elf-human romance themes, right? We're going to want a theme for Andreth and Aignor. We're going to want, of course, a theme for Baron and Luthien. We're going to want a theme for Tuor and Idril. But we're going to want a theme for Turin and Finduilas as well. And so I think if we can develop a kind of motif, right, an encounter, not just a like, hi, how are you meeting, but a real encounter between elf and human. So something like Finrod and Beor, right, would get a version of this theme. Elendil and Gilgalad would get a version of this theme, right? Any kind of, and then of course it will all come together in Aragorn and Arwen, of course, finally, in the end. But yeah, if the sort of romance version of it, if the love version of it could be a kind of version or a particular turn of that general thing to that, because it seems to me that I think it would be wonderful if we could have a reminder. This is something that I think it's easy to lose sight of kind of viscerally, right? On screen. I felt this several times in the Lord of the Rings films, right? Like it's so easy to begin to see, Peter Jackson has to go pretty far out of his way to try to fight against just seeing Aragorn and Arwen as like yet another couple where the dad gets in the way, right? I mean, it's to be able to retain the sense of strangeness, like, holy cow, this is, human and elf getting married. This is as bizarre, as unusual, as alien, as transgressive as like meeting a fairy queen in the woods, like happens in Smith of Wootton Major and that kind of thing, right? Or many medieval stories. It has to have that element, right? Like almost like not quite this, not the same character, not the same characteristic quite, but almost the same character of like Greek mythology, right? Of like what's his name? Aeneas's dad. Blanking on it. I'm doing horribly with names lately. I was forgetting some obvious names last night too. Begins with an A. Darn it, I can't remember Aeneas's dad's name. Anyway, when he met Venus, when he meets Aphrodite, and like that kind of like a mortal who encounters has a romantic encounter with a Greek goddess. That's the kind of there has to be an element of that, right? If we don't have an element of that, if we don't remember that the idea of a human and an elf getting together, Beren and Luthien getting together, Tuor and Idril getting together, it has to be like that, right? It has to retain that strangeness, that magic, that miracle, right? That kind of craziness,
etherealness.
Yes.
Etherealness.
Yeah, it's not just Anchises. Thank you, Tony, for crying out loud. Anchises, yes, that's his name. Thank you. Anyway, so it's gotta be something along those lines. Anyway, so if there's the like two worlds collide theme, right? The human perspective and Elvish perspective collide. If that seems to me like a version of this, two completely different cultures meeting, which are operating on totally different wavelengths and therefore not really understanding each other. That's a major theme of season 5. I think we need a theme for that. And along the lines of what we've been talking about. And I think that needs to be, the elf-human romance theme needs to be rooted in that, so that we can be recalling that this is a joining. It can be a harmonious joining, right? As with Beren and Luthien, and as with the big three, basically, but the big three couples. But it's always a joining from across a wide gulf. And Andreth and Agnor needs to be. I don't think it needs to be disharmonious. We don't want to make it sound like that's just a horrible idea from the get-go, right? But if there's a way in which, like, it needs to, at the very least, it needs to lack resolution, right? I mean, it's got to be unresolved, right? Because it is unresolved. Their relationship is unresolved. Their love is requited, but their relationship is unresolved. So that certainly we need to try to capture that. Anyway,
you did say last year when we discussed the music for the Merith Adathad, and I suggested that we have some nice sort of introduced to fairy, and you said sort of no, we need to do that as a counterpoint between elves and men. So this season is the season that we need to bring in that touch of fairy into the Elvish music, because we're now contrasting between the more grounded music of men,
yes,
against the immortal and mysterious nature of elves.
Right, exactly. And the place for that, like the most fairy that the elf themes ever get, I would think, would have to be Luthien at the Beren and Luthien encounter, right? I mean, Beren's encounter with Luthien is the most fairy story in every way, fairy story, right? Moment in the whole Silmarillion. It is the classic human man stumbling through the wood, comes across fairy princess, dancing. Like that's iconic, right? That is the iconic fairy tale moment. And that's really, so yeah, that's kind of what we're building towards in a sense, right? But that's the deepest version of it. So whatever Dairon is playing on his flute right there, he is capturing the essence of that fairy theme.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
Though
So look, I've got some ideas around mingling two themes, and I've sort of started working on something called the mingling. So I'll keep on working on that.
Nice. Now you bring up another really interesting point. Do we have? This might get too confusing. But do we have a? Wouldn't it be interesting to try to capture the points of view musically? There are some times where our scenes are going to be operating from one point of view or the other, right? Like Elvish point of view and humans come in, right? And we're really trying to help the viewers to see the humans in the scene from the Elvish point of view, because the Elvish perspective is kind of the frame of that scene. And the other way around, right? When it's a human scene and then they encounter an elf. I'm wondering if there could be themes for those, like human scene from the elf point of view, and elf scene from like an elf theme as they look to humans, right? Or like the effect that they have on humans, and a human theme, like how they look to, so not their own like native themes, as it were, right? But something to kind of capture how the humans look to elves and how the elves look to humans. See what I mean? It might be, as I said, I can't help but think this might be asking a little much, but I
think you can do that sort of thing with instrumentation. You can, and there are already some associations of some instruments already in the body of work that I have done, like flute with Manway, the glockenspiel with Vada. So if I do make a shift towards certain instruments to be used when Elvish themes are being played, it means that I can use those instruments to play a theme of men.
Right.
Or I can use the more grounded instruments that we're used to hearing all the time when it's a scene purely with the Houses of Men, and I can play that same theme with the Elvish instruments in a sort of a higher register.
Right. Cool.
In a little bit, when I merge the two themes, I merge the Noldor theme and the Teleri theme into the Gondolin theme. And one way I started with that was to have the two different themes played by their respective instruments, and then I switched the instruments over so that the Teleri theme was being played by the Noldor instruments and the Noldor theme was played by the Teleri instruments.
Right.
And that slowly got them mixing together.
Right. Cool. Yeah. James Oakley is also suggesting use of tempo variations to suggest to differentiate those perspectives as well. And yeah, I agree with James that tempo does seem particularly important under the circumstances when we're talking about the different perspectives of elves and men there.
Yes.
Yes. I would think that humans seen from the Elvish point of view would be something played very rapidly indeed, right? A very fast-moving song from the Elvish perspective. Yeah.
Don't blink.
Exactly. Very interesting. Okay, so particular characters. You bring up two really great characters. I think you mentioned these on the discussion boards that would need themes. Eol, certainly. We're going to want an Eol theme. And I would add as a side note, or maybe an addition, we're going to want a Maegwyn theme as well. And I would obviously the Maegwyn and the Eol theme are gonna be very similar. I would think they could be sort of paired, the two of them perhaps. Though what's the difference? How should the Maegwyn theme be different from the Eol theme exactly? In instrumentation, I think, you could have a different instrument. Is it just me, or does Eol seem like a bassoon guy? He kind of seems like a bassoon guy to me. I maybe, I don't know. But that's my first impulse with Eol. And then maybe shifting to something like shifting up to the oboe from the bassoon, for Maegwyn or something like that. I don't know. But Yeah. So, but as far as Aeol, so the one suggestion was the if his theme is based in Nan Elmoth, it could be tied to Melian and to nightingales. It could be, but I would think in a particular way, right? I mean, he's, on the one hand, Ael's been around for a long time. I mean, he's an Avari, but he's kind of a squatter in Nan Elmoth. I mean, he's, Melian was totally there first, right? And it's not like he's connected to Melian. If anything, his connection to Melian is one of slightly twisted imitation, right? I mean, the whole parallel between Thingol and Melian meeting and, between Thingol being enraptured by perceiving Melian and Arathel being ensnared when she sees Aeol. Yeah, they're parallel, but it's not exactly a sort of a flattering, homage to the, it's definitely a perversion of it. So, it would be kind of interesting to make Aeol's theme like a kind of twisted version of the Melian theme in some ways, though I'm not really sure that it's, apart from the Nan Elmoth connection and the kind of the way in which he's made Nan Elmoth into kind of a little mini Doriath, right? A little twisted mini Doriath, with his own kind of, twisted girdle, around it. But, yeah, anyway, but yeah, I don't think that Melian should be the sort of like the primary fixation, of Aeol's theme, or the primary basis of Aeol's theme.
I think I was going back to the conversations that you had last season about, and which we've never ended up showing.
Right.
Aeol's backstory just tended to get cut.
Yes.
But yeah, the fact that he found this forest which had its own source of power, which he has come in and adopted and twisted to his own ends.
Right.
So that was sort of where I was coming from in not that he's related to Melian, but that he has adopted this power and twisted it and manipulated it himself.
Yeah.
As being the origin of his power. And I really wanted to make like no distinction in theme between Nan Elmoth and Aeol.
Right.
Like they just need to be seen as one and the same. He is Nan Elmoth.
It's certainly every time we're going to be, that his theme should be played whenever we're at or near Nan Elmoth is certainly, I think. Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. Even after he's dead, if ever we're near Nan Elmoth again, we should be recalling Aeol. So, yeah. Now, Marie has a really fun idea. There's this, there's that mention in the Silmarillion that there's something crooked about Maiglin, right? This is just like, he ain't right from the beginning, right? He just ain't right. And so if there's something that could be, as Marie says, sort of intrinsically wrong about his theme, whether it's expressed in dissonance or, in just like what sounds like a wrong note, it should be, there should be something off about his theme. I think that's a really interesting idea. I think that'd be really fun to play with.
Yep. Yeah. I could look at, sort of the sort of having that really, really quick transition from one note to another, which I can intersperse within, like have Aeol's theme, but then as Maiglin's theme is having to have that little to show that this particular theme is off.
Right. Yeah. And as Nick points out, it has to be something that can be hidden initially, right? Not something that's just like you hear it and you're like, what the heck is this? This sounds horrible, right? It shouldn't be as blatant as that. It should be subtle. So yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Tony is suggesting it could be something in an old time signature, like Eol's theme could be in like 7/4 time or something like that. That would be really interesting. Yeah, actually, like Eol or Mygwyn's theme being in like 5/4 time or something would be, or 7/4 would be interesting. I kind of like that idea, actually.
Oh, good. Yep, that sounds like he'd do it.
Yeah. So I agree. Gilgalad is going to come up now, and he certainly is one of those characters. Obviously, we're going to have to play the long game on pretty importantly, because he is going to be one of the dominant characters of the Second Age, of course. So Gilgalad gets so little time in the narrative that Tolkien actually wrote, but of course, in the chronologies that Tolkien wrote, Gilgalad has the longest rule of any elf king in history, so he's going to be very important for a very long time. So what would be the important elements of Gilgalad's theme? He is the High King in the last. He's not yet the High King, but he is the High King and the last High King. Connecting, therefore, I would think that Gilgalad's theme would. Does Finwë have a theme himself?
No, I've shied away from individual themes among the elves, and I sort of feel that for the time of the Silmarillion story, we should sort of keep within the three kindreds, really to help audiences still sort of how difficult it is keeping track of who's who in the Silmarillion.
Right.
But yeah, if we use the music to help people understand, we're still talking about the people who never made it to Valinor. We're still talking about the Noldor here. Right. But in the same way that I feel that we should strongly use the three themes for the three houses of men during the time of the Silmarillion. Once we get to the end of the Silmarillion and we're done with the War of Wrath, all bets are off. And so that's why I'm saying let's sort of begin with a very small, subtle theme for Gilgalad, which is going to be the predominant theme once we get to the Second Age. And same with Numenor. We're going to put aside the three houses of men themes, and Numenor is going to be big and bright and grand and new.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's going to be a super important theme, of course, the Numenor theme, for later on. Absolutely. Okay. So we'll definitely have to think about that. But again, I think as far as like dominant note for Gilgalad, it's got to be kingship. It's got to be leadership, right? That's what he's gonna be all about. He is going to be not only the last High King, but the greatest High King of the elves. Of the Noldor. So it's got to be a Noldor theme, but it needs to be royal. It needs to be royal, and I would say like triumphant as well. He's going to, even in death, he's going to succeed. He's going to end his long career by taking down Sauron. Or helping to take down Sauron. So that's a big deal. And the other character theme, and I already mentioned it, but just to allude back to it again, I think that Andreth in particular, maybe Andreth and Adonel, like the wise woman theme, would be that. I think that would be really important for this season. There aren't too many other of the men. Beor will have the House of Beor, and I think maybe Beor retains the old version, like the episode 1 version of the Beor theme, right? Even when he's on his deathbed and the rest of his people are, their theme has changed, right? In Nargothrond, maybe Beor retains the kind of the pure original version of the House of Beor theme. Most of the other people, like Hador, doesn't really need his own theme because he's going to be the one who's going to really establish the House of Hador theme. But Endreth and Adenel definitely need a different theme, related to the House of Beor, but because what they do is kind of characteristic of the House of Beor. But I think that because we're going to want to kind of play off in the latter part of the season when we have the House of Beor up in Ladros and we have Endreth still leading as Wise Woman, but also raising up her. Her younger proteges to take over as military leaders. We're going to want to be able to kind of signal the shift, and the two different kind of elements there. But those are the only ones I could think of as far as new characters that we would really want to think about for this season. And then the last thing was the frame. We need Harad. We need a Harad theme, right? That's going to be really important. So the thing that's most difficult about a Harad theme is avoiding the obvious, right? I mean,
yes,
it's not just me, right? Like, we don't want this to sound like the beginning of Aladdin, basically, is what we don't want.
Yes.
Or nope.
Yeah, I mean, and yet it's hard. It's really hard because that's right, actually. It should sound like the beginning of Aladdin. I mean, it's like geographically, that is in fact the area that we're talking about. If you take the parallels to, the parallels that Tolkien put on his map, about where things are, relative latitude and stuff. But and it's especially interesting here because, I would say one thing. When we say we want to avoid that, what we really are talking about, right? I mean, like, let's call a spade a spade. What we're really wanting to avoid is having, like, and we've talked about this in other contexts, having, like, the bad guys look like Muslims and, the good guys look like Christians. Like, that's the main thing that we're wanting to avoid, right? But remember, in the Harad frame, the native Haradrim are not the bad guys, right? What the whole frame is about the corruption of their society from outside, right? So I think actually we're going to need at least two themes for the frame, right? We've got a Gandalf. Do we have a Gandalf theme already?
No, Gandalf's been one of those ones that I haven't done a lot of frame music. I did hope for
season one,
for young Estelle.
Yeah.
But I didn't really do anything around the dwarves in and the trip to Erebor in the last season. So I haven't done a lot, and Gandalf really misses out. Like, he doesn't even have his own theme in the Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit movies.
That's interesting.
Because he's the inspiration. He's not the Force. He's the inspiration that inspires others to do it. So he never got his own theme. But when I was listening to the sessions, talking about when you and Dave first discussed the frame. I was actually thinking, well, okay, this is a new area of music. I haven't done Gandalf before, but which leads me back to, well, we're going to have 5 Istari sometime. This is the thing with music, and it sort of leads you back to something earlier and earlier and earlier. So that, well, when do I have to begin this particular theme into the season? So I'm sort of thinking that maybe I should concentrate on a theme for the Istari in general.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to add that on just because because Gandalf shows up in the frame here, but it is. I mean, sooner or later we have to have it. I mean, we have to have an Istari theme, absolutely. And we're going to want to show the relationship between Gandalf and Saruman and Radagast and the Blue Wizards. to link them together, but to differentiate them in important ways. And so, yeah, I mean, if we have time, I think now's the time to think about that, especially because then did I say two? We need 3 themes for the frame then, right? We need a Gandalf theme, right? Because we need to figure out the Astari thing. We need a Gandalf theme, which, as you say, is associated with inspiring others, right? We need a Harad frame, just like a Harad theme, just the like generic, day in the life of Harad theme. This like basic, the one which can be tied to their culture, not to their like they are the bad guys under the influence of Sauron, because they're not yet. But then we do need a Mouth of Sauron theme, right? The like Cult of Sauron theme, basically. Right. Which, of course, I would think could be a lot of fun to do, right? Like some kind of like, I'm thinking some sort of like dark ritualistic version of the Myron theme, right? I mean, we've done some Sauron stuff already, right? So if we take some of that Sauron stuff and we make it into this kind of cult ritual sort of elements to it, right?
Deep male voices.
Yeah. So we can the music is actually something that we could kind of appeal to make the this whole dynamic of the Haradrim society. The Haradrim are not intrinsically evil, and Harad as a nation isn't intrinsically evil. They are coming under the domination of Sauron. Sauron is appropriating them, and he is corrupting them and acting upon them from the outside. That's the point of the frame. It's the drama of the frame, right? And I can't help but think that musically, so. Okay, did I say 3? 4? 4 themes, because the 4th theme would then be the Haradrim frame, right? Like the happy, cheerful Hobbiton of the South frame, theme, rather, right? Corrupted by the Sauron theme, right? So it's like a mingling of those two things where we see, and that of course can be the theme that we get when we have, the Haradrim riding into battle at Pelennor Field, right? Is going to be like the evil corrupted Haradrim theme music, right? Which is very different from the peaceful Hobbiton of the South theme. So anyway, yeah.
Sorry.
Maria's
5
themes,
an elephant.
Yeah, an elephant theme, right? Exactly. We can avoid that. I don't think we have to show any elephants on screen, especially if it's going to make you do another one.
Isn't Gandalf going to ride a white elephant in the frame?
Oh, we did want Gandalf riding a white elephant. Yeah, that almost has to happen. That almost has to happen, doesn't it?
I'm pretty sure the script team are on top of that.
Yeah. No, that is something that needs to happen. Yes. No, that does need to happen. So Marie is laughing at me and yelling at me at the same time for how much work I'm loading on you, Phil. For this. Keep in mind, these are all general, vague requests, ideas. It's okay if 100% of them don't get done. Just thinking about things that could get done. Oh, I also wanted to add on the subject of like weighting you down with a huge amounts of work. When I talked about like annotation of the outlines and stuff, it doesn't have to be. That's like your personal homework, right? I think it would be a really fun kind of layer to add. I'm not laying that on the script team either, to say that like, please include also all of the musical themes that are going to come in at every place. It's just, I think that would be a really fun thing for people to kind of comment on, and especially when we do the discussion of the different episodes, to have people kind of able to go back after we've talked about the themes and the music and sort of shown that to be able to.
The script team did do that last year. In their script, they annotated the theme of Bottomless Dread, in one episode, which was full points to Rhiannon there.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, good. Let's see. I'm trying to find the, hang on a second. There we are. I'm trying to pull up just so that people can, for those who are watching who don't know, we had David over on YouTube there was asking about this, and I want to make sure people know about this. I want to get your YouTube page, Phil, that contains your playlists here. So for folks who want to find that, we've been alluding to several of the, several things that have been done before. You can find the different playlists this is the SilmFilm music playlist here on Philip Menzies' YouTube channel. So you can find the different seasons and stuff that we've done. This is the playlist put together specifically for the session that we did at the end of season 4. So you can see, some of the themes that he's done for all of these. So anyway, those are just some, so Philip Menzies' YouTube channel, and then his SilmFilm music playlist is where you can go there. So we'll try to have that we'll try to include that in the notes. Yeah, excellent.
I need one more subscriber to make 100 subscribers.
There we go. Excellent. Well, and I think that's it. That is, in fact, it for the last thing that we were supposed to be talking about. I don't know. It's late, even though we started late. I should probably let people go eventually. So our next session is actually going to be next week because our schedule was thrown off by the holidays. So this week is actually a makeup for last week when it was New Year's Eve. So our next session is going to be next week on January 14th at 10 p.m. Eastern, as usual. And we're going to be back to discussing the episode. So we discussed the A plot, which was the Aravel Aeol story in episode 2. We didn't get to the B plot from that episode, so we'll do the B plot, and then we'll move on to episode 3, which focuses on the death of Beor. So excited to get back to the episode outline discussions next time. So that'll be a lot of fun. James Oakley humbly suggests that the word Silmharmonic should be used somewhere in the playlists, Phil, which does seem appropriate. Anyway, okay, so there you go. David on YouTube said he just subscribed to you, so there you go, Phil. All right, very good. So thanks, everybody. Thank you, Phil, for joining us. This has been wonderful. I can't wait to get back and to hear some of the things that you and Megan come up with, and Tony's stuff that he's already written and everything. So. And feel free, for those of you who want to join in this creative community here, you can go to our discussion boards. I don't want to get it wrong. Marie will remind me of the web address for our discussion boards for people to join in our discussion and see some of the other things going on. We have lots of things happening. We'll be talking about other kinds of artistic concepts and commissions that we have for folks. We're going to be discussing in a couple weeks' time, after we discuss the next steps of the episodes, we're going to be talking about concepts for casting. So we're going to be kind of covering a bunch of these things here. So forums.signumuniversity.org is where you want to go, and it's the Silmarillion Film Project forum on there, and you'll see lots of places to participate in the script discussions, places to participate in various of the different kind of elements. If you want to contribute to discussions about the music, you want to talk about art or casting, or you want to talk about any of these things, costuming and visual art and all kinds of things. This has been a long-running project. We've been doing this now for over 5 years, and it's been a great deal of fun. So always welcoming. Really excited to hear about your new composing partner, Phil. That's great. And you jumped in with with musical compositions from the very beginning back in season 1. And I really appreciate all the work that you've done over the years. And I'm delighted that others are joining you now in that. That's really great.
Yeah, I'd be really always a pleasure to join you, Corey and Dave. But I'd be really happy for other people who want to contribute musically. I think that collaborating is great. We did a fantastic collaboration with the Oath of Fëanor last year, and I think there's room to do something like that this year with the Light of the West.
Absolutely.
And
Nice.
the more the merrier.
Very good. Absolutely. Especially considering all of the work I dumped on you today. So that's very good. All right. Excellent. So thank you, everybody. I will see you guys next week for our next episode discussions. And I will say, as always, thanks for listening and Godspeed.